check out this article that was written back in 2017, and it's called Why the Next Black President Could Be a Republican. So I read the article, it was really powerful. I said, I got to talk to the author of this article, and he happens to have a new book out called When the Stars Begin to Fall, Overcoming Racism and Renewing the Promise of America. Let's bring him on, Mr. Ted Johnson. How are you, sir?
I'm good. I'm good. It's good to be here.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. This article, again, it's 2017, but it's really relevant right now. And the main image of the article is of Tim Scott.
Right.
So before we go deep into the article, I have to ask you, what are your thoughts about Tim Scott raising millions and millions of dollars? And it appears that he might, of course, if Trump doesn't run because doesn't run because they'll
Right.
all obey Trump. But if he runs, it appears what I'm seeing, he could be a serious, viable candidate. What are your thoughts when you saw this trending yesterday?
Yeah, and so it was surprising, frankly, that he was doing so well this early on. I mean, we're still 3 years out from election year, but the fact that he's got this major donor out in Hawaii suggests that he's now looking around to see, sort of testing the proposition that maybe he could be president one day. This isn't new though. He's been to Iowa and New Hampshire back in 2017, 2018 when he was pitching his opportunity zones and signing the Trump's tax cuts. People from South Carolina, especially Black Republicans from South Carolina, don't go to Iowa or New Hampshire unless they have something in mind. Now, whether he actually runs for president or not remains to be seen, but he is absolutely positioning himself to be on the ticket, either at the top of it or as someone's vice presidential candidate. And basically, the fundraising prowess he's shown over the last few years is a testament to his thinking and the party's thinking that he might have a pretty spectacular future going forward if the cards fall just right.
Now, Ted, a really powerful part of your article, again, this is, 2017, is folks were calling in saying, well, there's no way that white people in Georgia or Texas or Florida are going to vote for a black man, even though he's a Republican. But here's the part that really wore me out. This was a study that you quoted, and it said this: white conservatives are either more supportive of minority Republicans or just as likely to vote for a minority as they are a white Republican. The base of the GOP does not discriminate against minority nominees in high-profile contemporary elections. You give examples of Senator Tim Scott, of Rep. Mia Love, who's no longer there,
Right.
Will Hurd, Alan West. But what you're basically saying is y'all don't get it. They are in line as long as, you didn't say this, is my words, as long as you will support white supremacy policies, they're happy with you. So break that down for us.
Yeah, so the bottom line is that the political environment we're in today is a game of team sports politics. You are a Republican or you're a Democrat, and you ride or die with your party. There's not a whole lot of median voters or persuadable voters in the middle who are looking to see what your views are on particular policies. Right now, especially once we get the presidential elections, the table's already set. People already know who they're voting for based on their party allegiance. And that partisan identity is so ingrained in many voters that it almost doesn't matter which candidate the party puts forward, they're going to support that person. And if you don't believe me, that's how the Republican Party got Donald Trump. He wasn't more conservative. He didn't have a history of good governance. He didn't even have a policy agenda that he could pitch. But once he became the nominee, all the people that said Trump could never get out of a primary, talk trash about him in the primary, they got in line and made him the 44th president of the 45th president of the United States. So what the research says, what history has shown us, certainly recent history, is that if you are a good party adherent, if you're a good partisan, and you make it out of a primary, you are not going to lose people's votes because of the color of your skin. And the Tea Party wave brought in Rubio, Cruz, Tim Scott, Alan West, Mia Love, and so many others. And this was the Tea Party movement was based on racial resentment towards President Obama. And yet a sweep of minority candidates came in because they were more conservative in the primaries than the white Republicans they were running against, because they adhered more closely to the Tea Party line at the moment. So that's how you get a Black candidate. Tim Scott's challenge will be getting out of a Republican presidential primary, which is extremely difficult, but the color of his skin alone will not be the reason that this version of the Republican Party, even post January 6th, decides that he can't be their nominee.
And let's remind people that Tim Scott didn't even vote on the January 6th commission when you had people in the U.S. Capitol with the Confederate flag. Tim Scott voted against that. Like, that's how much he is in line with what they want. Let me ask you this. I think that, I think it's safe to say Clarence Thomas is the most powerful Black man in the country. And he has voted against, he has done everything anti-Black as possible on the Supreme Court. How dangerous, when I think of someone like Clarence Thomas, how dangerous do you think a Black Republican president like a Tim Scott would be to Black communities?
So this is a good question, and this is this may surprise some of your listeners, and maybe even you. We'll see. But Tim Scott is not Allen West. The Black Republicans are not the same creature, no matter what state they come from or anything. So Tim Scott cares about funding for HBCUs. Every time Trump had those HBCU presidents fly in, he just did the photo op. Tim Scott did all of the work to ensure those schools got increased funding from previous years. Tim Scott, whatever you think about opportunity zones, these sort of free market tax incentives that to get rich people to invest in poor communities, Tim Scott has directed that money towards poor Black communities. And a lot of those communities, again, are surrounding HBCUs. Whatever you think about Tim Scott, most Black families prefer school choice to being told their kids are going to go to the school, the local school, and being mandated to go there without any option. Tim Scott is pro school choice. So there's his policy agenda, if just his alone, is really geared towards addressing poverty, particularly in Black communities, addressing education, particularly in Black communities, and his Walter Scott Notification Act. He wrote the anti-lynching bill that the Senate Republicans are now sitting on. But so the guy is not going to come in, at least in my view, and I could be wrong, and trash the American democratic system. But here's the other side of this. He will be a good Republican. And so if you are a Republican president and you have a Republican Congress, that means the judges, that means questions about abortion or gun rights, that means questions about the strength of national security or the qualified immunity for police. These are things we know where he falls down on because we have his voting record. So to the extent you think that he will come in to be an instrument of white supremacy, intentionally, explicitly being used as a tool by white people, I don't think that's him. But to the extent you believe conservative policy harms Black communities, Tim Scott is going to be a Black conservative, and conservative policies, again, will have their time in the sun if he becomes president.
Well, I want to push back on some of the things that you said, because I think, so for example, the opportunity zones, that's been a disaster, and it's really created more gentrification in Black neighborhoods. In South Carolina, in Virginia, he really just gave a bonanza to companies coming in and really gutting Black neighborhoods. And also, even with HBCUs, the author of the HBCU bill was Alma Adams, a Black woman, and she's got the Future Act, and she gets no credit for that whatsoever.
Right.
But because, and I know Trump signed it as a formality, but he didn't have to sign it. There was no reason for him to sign it. So I don't know why Tim Scott would get any kind of credit for that. And then lastly, as far as school choice, I agree with you. Some of us do support school choice, but what's happening is, and I have seen Tim Scott do nothing for this, Black and Latin public schools are being defunded. They're being defunded. So I think on surface, he says opportunity zones, which again, gentrification, HBCUs, which again, Alma Adams. And I feel like he is getting credit for the absolute wrong things. I can't think of a good policy that he's done when I really go below the surface. And to the second half of your point, I think that a Black conservative could create even more destructive policies, because they're saying, Well, a black person is doing it. The black guy's doing it. So it just can't be racist. Why do we need voting rights?
Right.
Why do we need this Voting Rights Act? Affirmative action. What's the reason for it? Why do we need black judges on a bench? We're colorblind. So I just respectfully, Ted, I would push back on some of the things you started with as far as him being, I don't know, caring about poor people. From cotton to Congress. That's his line. But
right.
what are your thoughts on that?
Look, so I don't want to be in the position of like being a spokesman for these guys because I have no idea what kind of president he would be. And frankly, I thought Kamala Harris and Cory Booker would be good candidates in the Democratic primary, and they didn't even make it to the voting. So the same could very well happen for Tim Scott. But I will say this on the opportunity zones, you're absolutely right that opportunity zones, whether here or in Britain where they've been tried, they typically do not work. And that is a function of rich people not having poor people's interests at heart or people of color's interests at heart.
That's right.
But so though the vehicle could be used for these good purposes, it doesn't mean that people will use it for these good purposes. But I bring it up because the person who the person who has often talked about opportunity zones, aside from Tim Scott, is Cory Booker. In fact, Senator if you look at Cory Booker and his Democratic debates, he talked about opportunity zones helping HBCUs.
Very true.
And so I brought up that example only to show how Tim Scott is a black senator in many ways, in the same way that Cory Booker is a black senator, and that they're looking at the tools available to them that are feasible politically and saying, how can we leverage these tools to help black communities, even though in the outcome it tends not to be the case. On the education point, you're absolutely right that just because most black families believe in school choice, one, it doesn't necessarily mean better educational outcomes, but the other part of it is because school districts there's thousands of school districts across the country, that a senator can't really do anything in any of those individual districts unless a federal bill gets passed. And that didn't happen. I think there was some money carved out for giving kids public vouchers so that they can use basically public money as a way of paying charter school or private school tuition as a way of being school choice. But the program wasn't big enough to have the kind of national impacts that it could have had if there was more investment in it. And then lastly, I agree absolutely with you about Alma Adams. That's my home state is North Carolina. But in the Senate, like you said, Trump didn't have to sign it. But the fact that he did wasn't because of Omarosa. It was because of Tim, and it wasn't because of Stephen Miller or Bannon or any of these folks. It was only because Tim Scott said, Mr. President, like you got to do this. And the way he did it is he said, if you do this, this is funding that is increased from the Obama presidency. You can best Obama by signing this HBCU bill, and that got Trump's interest, and that's where Tim Scott operates. He's pragmatic in this sense, which sometimes is good politics, but if you care about reducing racial inequality, pragmatism often isn't the best way forward.
And you're right. Tim Scott knew that would be a good talking point. That Trump could constantly say, and we got to concede, Republicans are good with their messaging. Every millisecond you heard Trump say HBCUs, and Alma Adams is like, what hello?
Exactly.
But you're right. Tim Scott convinced Trump to do that. So yeah, that's it's interesting. And listen, I think that the original black senators, Hiram Revels and Blanche Bruce, would be rolling in their graves at Tim Scott. But before we go, I want to talk about your book, but I do want to ask you this. I don't know if you could tackle this or not. I've interviewed a lot of historians, and one of the things that they've said is that the whole idea of sellout culture, that's a really complicated word, but they said that outside of Isaiah Montgomery in 1890 in Mississippi, when he was voting against black men to being able to vote, even though he was a black man, they said that we haven't really seen these kinds of black Republicans throughout history. Clarence Thomas, Senator Tim Scott, like they said, this is going too far. This is not what you saw with the black Republicans of the 1960s, even of the 1970s. Like this is a whole new level of them realizing, wait a minute, if I am the one that what's their line? I'm an independent thinker. I'm off the Democratic plantation. That right. They could have there's a robust career for the delusional black Republican who will sell out their own people. And I've interviewed historians who have said, like, someone like Senator Scott, this is fairly, now you can roll your eyes at Candace Owens and Diamond and Silk, they're not in power, but right. Senator Scott, Clarence Thomas, like this is, this is something new that we haven't really, it's kind of unprecedented in history as far as Black officials who get power. Would you agree with that? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. So certainly at the local level and in congressional elections, I do think you get Black Republicans like the Allen West, frankly, who
Yeah.
are opportunists and are looking to just be contrarian for no other reason than like the Sheriff Clarks and the Candace Owens. I mean, but true Black conservatives, most of them vote Democratic because they recognize the importance of civil rights, and Democrats are the party of civil rights, certainly at the moment, have been for decades. But the Black conservatives that are Black Republicans, the Condoleezza Rices, the Colin
Mm.
Powells, the Ed Brooks, from the senator from 1960s and the 70s from
Yes, yes,
Massachusetts. Yeah,
yes.
like these are actually principled people who don't abandon their principle just to be good partisans. And the difference with Tim Scott is he is in power at a time where there are no other Black Republicans. Maybe there are two new ones in Congress now, in the House, but no other Black Republicans with his stature at a very hyper-partisan moment. And so his voting record suggests that he is even a more of a staunch Trump kind of Republican than I think his actual principles or beliefs would do in another administration. If we were in a Romney presidency, for example, it might be a little bit different. But here's the big thing. Tim Scott he doesn't need, or never mind him, any Black Republican that makes it out of a presidential primary doesn't need Black voters to win the election.
That's right.
And this
That's
is
right.
this is the part that that I think often goes over folks' head, is that Democrats, you cannot win without the Black vote. Republicans, you can, because white folks vote so heavily Republican. Donald Trump lost 2020 by 43,000 votes over 3 states. 2 of those states had large Black populations. So a Black man at the top of the ticket, if he shaves 2 or 3% off of the Black vote in particular states and does everywhere else just as well as Trump did, he becomes president. And so that's how this works. And my own research shows that when Black candidates run, it increases Black turnout, but it only really helps Black Democrats. But when you look at how Tim Scott did against in his state election for the Senate against how Donald Trump did with Black voters, Tim Scott did better with Black voters in South Carolina than Trump did. John James in Michigan did better with
Yeah.
Black voters than Trump did in Michigan. Now
Although
that's
he
only
lost.
3, right, and still
Yeah.
lost, right, and only 2
Yeah,
or
yeah.
3 percentage points better, but 2 or 3 percentage points changes Pennsylvania,
A lot.
Michigan,
Yeah.
and probably and definitely Georgia in the last election. So that the pathway isn't to say that Tim Scott is going to bring in a whole bunch of new Black voters that used to vote Democrat, but it's saying that he will that white Republicans won't run, and that there will be a small number of Black, probably male voters who might decide that having a Black man is better than having a Midwestern white Democrat at the top of the ticket, and say, let's give the guy a shot. We'll
And
see.
listen, and then he'll have his messaging. He'll say, "You're not racist. Look at me. The Republican Party isn't racist." He'll have that message to make them feel better. I mean, he'll use a remixed version of the Southern Strategy, and a Black man using the Southern Strategy. Good God, we'll see how far. But I really appreciate your article that you wrote. It's so crazy. 4 years later, I personally think it would be very dangerous. I think that we would see, I know people can't stand Donald Trump, and I think he's awful too, but Ronald Reagan we're still suffering from Ronald Reagan's policies on Black and brown communities. He was horrific. And I think we could see those kind of actions with somebody like a Senator Tim Scott. But before you go, want to talk about your book, When the Stars Begin to Fall, Overcoming Racism and Renewing the Promise of America. Tell me about the book.
Yeah, so the book is basically saying that structural racism is not just some inconvenience that harms Black and brown people, but is an actual threat to the nation. And that if we don't pull out all the tools in the toolbox to reduce the incidence of structural racism in this country, that the next version of this nation is not going to be one we're proud of, and we may continue backsliding as we have over the last couple of years. So racism must be addressed. Certainly economic inequality is a problem. Certainly, climate change, all of these things are issues. But if we don't address the problem of racism in the United States, all of those other things are really going to harm Black and brown people first and worst. first. And so the way past this is to try to craft a multiracial national solidarity over the cause, a cause of justice or morality. Get people to bond together, not for lower taxes or not to increase healthcare, but get people to join together because due to the recognition that we cannot have a nation where we're all created equal if we don't address racial inequality. And if we can come together over this idea that racism harms all of us, then we can compel the state to fix all the things it broke over the last 245 years of our nation's history, and not think of racism as something white people need to fix for Black people, but something that the United States of America needs to address because the policies that it's passed in the past and currently hold harm Black and brown communities in particular. And the last bit of this sort of the theme of the book is that the model for this national solidarity is found in the history and experiences of Black Americans. If you study the history of Black folks in this country, everything we have done has made a nation become a better version of itself. So if you want to know how to make the nation the more perfect union Lincoln talked about, look at Black folks, look at our political strategies, look at our activism, look at our optimism and perseverance, and all of the things that made Black folks a power in this nation today are the very things the nation needs to mimic in order to realize a better version of itself. It's part memoir, it's part political science and sociology, part history, and it tries to craft a way forward. Doesn't suggest it'll be easy, but suggests that there is a path that we can take if we're brave enough to do so.
I love a book that has solutions. I really do. The book is called, again, When the Stars Begin to Fall, Overcoming Racism and Renewing the Promise of America. Before you go, final question. In 2024, if Trump doesn't run, forgive me, if Trump doesn't run,
please.
Lord have mercy. What do you think would happen, just asking you to use your crystal ball, in a presidency where it's Senator Tim Scott against Vice President Kamala Harris?
What a
Who do you think
question.
would win?
Yeah, a great question, and I don't know the answer to that. Just thinking about it strictly from political science scholarship, trying to forecast, I think one, it will depend on the state of the economy. Has there been a terrorist attack? But assuming everything is where it is today, we've improved with COVID, no major economic disasters, national security disasters. I do think a Harris-led ticket would have an advantage over a Scott-led ticket. If it's Scott versus a white man in the Democratic Party or an all-white ticket in the Democratic Party, then that's where I think that that Scott at the top of the party may give the Republicans a slight edge for the White House. And it's all speculation, but I think that's where we would be. Scott versus Harris, though, I'd have to give the edge to Harris. I think that's maybe I'll leave it there. I could speculate forever, but I'll say that.
One thing too is, I could be wrong, but I don't know how Republicans would go. They might go for it because they know, again, I stand by a Black man upholding anti-Black policies. They can go really far. But the fact that he's single, he better get married soon. I don't know.
So you know who that would hurt him most with? Again, if we're thinking through this in sort of scholarly terms, are older Black people. Older Black folks, the sort of church-going conservatives in the South, will look at Tim Scott and say, something's up there, but I will say, here's what I'll say. Tim Scott wanted to be a preacher before he got into business and politics. And so I think he could lean on that sort of, that
haven't found the right woman.
Yeah, that sort of thing. But the other thing is, his running mate will be really important. Like Obama knew what he was doing when he chose Joe Biden.
Oh yeah,
as his number two. Tim Scott would probably need a white male governor from a upper Midwest or Southern state to sort of give people in the Republican Party some comfort that he's not going to dramatically change the party's course. And his running mate would probably turn off a lot of middle of the road voters generally, and a lot of Black men who might be interested, if he's got this really bad Southern governor with a bad track record on civil rights. So he can, even if he has some advantages baked in because of his region and his race and his gender, those can be undone with bad decisions. And that's why this is not a foregone conclusion that that he will make it out of the primaries, or that even if he should be the nominee, that he would win, even if up against an all-white Democratic ticket. But if they play their cards right, there's a shot there for sure.